There are a lot of things that can be harmful to the black family: incarceration, poverty, single-parent households, and personality disorders. Everyone's heard this phrase, but most people don't go in depth about the origin behind it. This phrase is known as generational curses. I want to explore why they exist and how we can prevent them. This is About My Issue.
I forgot the words.
In the words of Marvin Gaye, what's going on?
Ain't no way this man got his own show.
Man, God is great, and I couldn't have done this without him or you all either.
I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to talk to y'all about something that's been on my heart for a while.
What's been on your mind?
Generational curses.
Ooh, the layers on this conversation.
I know, and that's exactly why I want to dive right into it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, thank you. So, I probably want to open up with, what is a generational curse to y'all? Because when I looked up the definition online, it was just a habit that could be picked up by any, you know what I'm saying, generation passed on from one to the next. But what do y'all define a generational curse as?
I'd say unlearned, traumas that have not been dealt with and passed on to the next generation.
Okay.
Yeah,
What else?
I think like you saw online, it is those habits, those patterns, those actions that are passed on from generation to generation, whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah, that's true.
I would say negative patterns and mindsets that are passed on through families.
For sure. What you feel like, bro?
I disagree with everyone here.
Like, okay. So, like, when it comes to me, generational curses that I have in my family is, you know, alcoholics, womanizers, and gamblers, you know? So, yeah. Not that man, I try and steer clear of those things because one thing, I've never been like a huge drinker. But I do like to have a cocktail every now and again. As far as womanizers, and women too expensive these days. I don't be doing all that. Getting nails done, lashes done for multiple women, that's too much. I can't be doing all that. So the womanizers thing, that was out of that. Gambling, I do enjoy that. I'm not gonna hold you. Like every now and again with sports betting, I'll get into it and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's never like my whole paycheck. You see what I'm saying? Like I got people in my family, like if I can be completely open and honest, my parents got married, right? And they went to Vegas. Now my mom don't drink, she don't smoke, she don't gamble, she don't do none of that. But my dad, on the other hand, he don't play. You see what I'm saying? So I think they may have gotten a good amount in like wedding gifts, over like $10,000. That shit was gone the first night. Like, you see what I'm saying? And so I had to learn from a young age, don't do that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, watch out for that. So like those three things are something that affects my family the most that I try and steer apart, man. I don't know if y'all can relate, but that's definitely how it goes with me.
Yeah, I've definitely seen addictive personalities in my family, from like chain smoking cigarettes to alcoholism, excuse me, and yeah, gambling.
Right.
Yeah. So just taking that in at a young age, I never wanted to be bound to addiction or bound to any of those sort of habits. So I went the opposite route.
Yeah,
you know?
You got to.
And I think sometimes it boils down to like the generational curses, right? It boils down to that decision for the person, like what it means to you and what you're willing to do to counteract those habits.
For sure.
Same for me, addictive personalities, whether it was alcohol, drugs, from like something as minor as marijuana to something as intense as cocaine, gambling. So I had a family member who went from the hard stuff of drugs, and then once they got clean, they just picked up a new habit. And so same thing, seeing that, hearing that from them, just observing that, I steer away. So I waited until I was 21 to drink alcohol.
Good for you.
Yeah, complete opposite, just because I realized that it wasn't just my grandparents. It was, I had my dad and then, great aunts and uncles. So, just being mindful of those behaviors and making the choice to do different.
Hope, thank you for meeting with me on today. It means a lot to me. I wanted to talk to you about something that I think is really important that I don't think people talk about too much, and that is generational curses.
Okay, sure. Can you tell me what you mean by generational curses?
So I think my definition, especially when I looked it up, generational curses is any habit or behavior that's picked up from one generation to the next.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I think you are really describing is intergenerational trauma. And I say intergenerational trauma just because generational curses has a lot of shame behind it. And, you know, trauma is really what we're talking about. And if we're talking about trauma, it's those horrible things that have happened and people really don't have the ability to cope. And so we're passing on those traits, those behaviors, those thoughts, those patterns down for generations to come.
Gotcha. You know, that's funny. I've never really thought about it like that. But the only reason I say curse is because I feel like if I have a cousin, right, and he watched his grandfather, like, sell drugs and go to, like, prison for a certain amount of time, like 15, 20 years, whatever it is. And then he had a son, which would be his father, right? And then he did the same exact thing. And so my cousin has two examples of what he's not supposed to do. And then all of a sudden, he still does it. Now he's going to jail for 15 to 20 years. That's why I say that's almost like a curse. You know what I mean? Because it's like something you couldn't really control that still ended up happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say the curse just brings about a lot of shame. So, like, this is something bad, this is something wrong that my family has done. And so trauma is really, these horrible things happen and it's very difficult for me to cope. And so that is what we're seeing when we have these generations of people in poverty or generations of people who are ending up in prison. Yes, I see these things are happening and maybe that's not how I want my life to go, but what resources do I have that are helping me cope?
Yes, that's what I was just about to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what can we do to prevent them, or can you not prevent them?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very difficult because there's this research that is coming out and it's called like epigenealogy. And so it's the idea that like our genes are being passed down, or like if, for example, there's a mother who is stressed during her pregnancy or who has experienced trauma, these genes are passed down and they're more like predisposed to this stress. And so that is one way that it's passed. Another is that we're social learners. And so we pick up on things that are going on around us. That's just how we are as humans. And so I think when we're talking about changing this trauma, it is really like, first we have to realize what is trauma. Am I experiencing prolonged anxiety, prolonged depression? Is when horrible things happen to me, is it difficult for me to cope? Am I drinking or smoking, doing these other vices to take the edge off? I think so. That's one part, recognizing what trauma is. I think another part is having these conversations with our family. Like, why am I doing the things that I do? Am I doing it because this is what my mother did to me, or is this really what feels good in my body? So, for example, there's this story of, you know, this family who's preparing Thanksgiving dinner and they cut the legs off of the chicken, and she's like, well, why are you cutting, or the turkey, why are you cutting the legs off the turkey? Well, that's what my mom did. And so she goes back and she's like, well, Mom, why are you doing it? And she's like, well, that's what my mom did. And so we can't ask her mom, who's obviously transitioned, why she's doing it, but we ask other family members and they're like, well, we only did this because
This is what we saw, this is what we learned.
the chicken wouldn't fit in the pot. So there's no real reason behind it, but this is just what we have learned through generations to come. And so I feel like that's how we move, is that we just do it because this is what we see our family doing. So this is all we know.
Yeah.
So really having those conversations, which I think is hard for Black people sometimes, is to have those conversations because it's so much pain that we don't know how to deal with.
Let me ask y'all this though. Do y'all feel like generational curses come from a higher power, or they just happen by chance? Because me, personally, I feel like God doesn't necessarily bestow generational curses on people, but because we have free will, we have the option, or I should say the choice, to do whatever we want to do. And he doesn't necessarily stop it, because I don't feel like that's how God works. Because sometimes people be viewing him, or whatever religion you believe in, that you refer to him, universe, but like, it's not their job to stop you from the choice that you're making. You see what I'm saying? Because if that was the case, you wouldn't be able to live at all. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's like I think one time I was going through a really rough period in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just seemed like it was one cloudy storm after the next, and it was tough to pull myself out. And I don't really drink like that, but I had way too much to drink, you know.
You're losing all your bets.
Man, I was, I ain't gonna say I was losing all my bets, but I just wasn't feeling right, you know what I mean? And I know I had met a friend somewhere, and I feel like that's the worst time to drink. It's because they call spirits for a reason,
Right.
you know what I mean? And so I had way too much to drink, and like, I was getting ready to hop in my car and take off, knowing I shouldn't have been driving. But I got a text from my mom. I'm gonna try and not get too emotional. But she was like, I just want you to know I love you. You're enough. And whatever you got going on, it's gonna be okay. So I got an Uber and got back to the crib and got right. So that's what I mean when we have the free will to make choices, you know? Because I feel like still God can intervene in other ways and give you the choice and say, you don't have to go in that direction. You can do something else and it's gonna be okay. I don't know. I'm getting a bit emotional, but you know, I don't know if y'all can see it. No. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Honestly.
I don't know, man. Y'all had moments like that, or you know?
Yeah. So, since we're diving in deep, just the overall meaning of who we are today. My great grandmother, she passed away on my birthday, my 20th birthday.
Yeah.
And her last words were, "Be good, live life, good and well." To me. But one of the lessons that she's always taught me, which she was a gambler, but she always taught me, bet on a sure thing. Always bet on a sure thing. And to add to your thing where it was like, I think you asked, is it bestowed on us by a higher power? These generational curses. I don't necessarily believe that, but I do think lessons that we need to learn are. And for each individual, it might look differently. I'm not a gambler, so that's not a lesson I need to learn. But I can be hard at it. Yeah. So learning lessons might take me some time. And I think the right people giving us those messages along the way can be the difference between growth and being stagnant.
That's true. Right. That's true.
And being given the choice. So I agree with both of you. Absolutely. We get full reign, free will, and be able to make any choice that our higher power, in this case for me it's God, gives us. And sometimes I also think though that our higher power then lets us know like, hey, this is going to be your time to break these bad habits that whether are with you, started in at some point in your family. But I think what's really important is recognizing that you do have choice and not using it as a crutch. Because sometimes if we're not careful, we can say, oh, well, God wouldn't have put this on my heart, or I wouldn't have been able to do this if God didn't want this for me. And so instead of being intentional about making changes, especially ones that have been passed down, whether it's intentional or not, we just have to be mindful that we still have the choice to change.
I agree. I think I want to get into, like, if anything can be a generational curse, right? Because I know on my father's side, womanizers, alcoholics, and gamblers are a very real thing, right? So I try and stay clear of those as much as I can. But I was wondering if certain things can be a generational curse, even though it may not necessarily hurt people as bad. So that could be, a bad attitude or liars. Can anything be grouped as a generational trauma?
Intergenerational trauma, yes. And I think what you're talking about is these are ways that people are learning to cope. So these are like when trauma happens, people, especially Black people, were really good at surviving. And so we adapt these maladaptive behaviors, which could be a bad attitude or substance misuse,
Right.
because those are things that are helping me cope.
Right.
And so, yes, I think those things can be habits that are passed down, right? Because these are things, this is how I saw my mom cope.
Right.
So I would say those are the pieces of trauma that stick.
Man, so I feel like you done went deeper and I done almost lost you. So, like, you're saying the generational trauma goes past the actual alcohol, gambling, and what's the last thing I said? Being a womanizer, because it's something else that's to help you cope. What could that be, or you don't necessarily know what could start that? Because I've never heard of it in that terms. Like, this is more so a coping mechanism, other than just what you like do as a person. What does that mean?
Well, think of like slavery, right?
Okay.
So, or even like the whole idea of like spankings and whoopings. So, where did this start? We could maybe say it started in slavery. And so we are now whooping our kids, or back in slavery, we started whooping our kids because they need to learn how to mind. They need to learn how to be respectful. And so we're just kind of continuing to do this.
You think slaves was whipping their slave children? Or you think somebody else, like the slave owners, were whipping their children?
Well, there's this idea in the Black community that you have to be respectable. Like when we go into the stores, don't you get in the store and
Don't
embarrass
touch
me in front of
stuff,
these,
yeah.
don't touch stuff, embarrass me in front of these white people.
Right.
So I think this idea of I need to teach my children to be respectable so that they can survive in this environment.
Sure.
So I think, I mean, I wasn't there, but I definitely think, I'm sure they were being beaten.
Right.
Because you have to know how to be respectable in public, or else it's going to be much worse what you're going to get from these white people.
Sure. That's deep.
So I think so.
I've never really thought about that. So let me ask you this: do you feel like generational trauma comes from a higher power, or it just happens by chance? Because I really don't think things just happen by chance. I think in life everything has a type of cause and effect. Yeah.
I think, yes, everything happens for a reason.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it just depends maybe on how you think about life. I really don't know. Some people would say the universe, again, works for me rather than it's something that's happening to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think about people who say this may be a generational trauma, but because it hasn't hurt me or someone else, I can live with it. I'll be fine.
I think that maybe we're not going deep enough because everybody, we're all humans, we're all living a human experience, so nobody is free from suffering, loss, grief, all of those things. And so just to say that this was my parents, this is everybody else around me but me, that's not really possible.
Gotcha. Brittany, you looking like you got something to say.
No, I'm just, a firm believer of you are a product of your own environment.
That's true. But what you mean by that? Like, I know some people in their family, like, they act ratchet. Some people act bougie. Like, how did you feel about that growing up and seeing your aunts and uncles and how they act?
Well, just, your upbringing, who's raising you. It makes a big difference on how you turn out when, when you become an adult.
Yeah.
The morals that you're given and, the beliefs that you have a lot to do with how you're raised.
Yeah.
And, just being, everybody can be a good person.
That's true.
But it takes a lot, it takes more than just being a good person to make good decisions. And, you have to really think about that. And not really just go with what you're used to. Go with what you really, truly believe is the best for you and what direction that you're trying to go.
Yeah, that's true. Leanne, what you think about that? Because I feel like you got a little something brewing. Think about.
Thinking about it now, I feel like there was alcoholism and stuff with like my dad and his mom too.
Yeah.
But I guess I don't drink, so.
Yeah, I feel you.
Did I break
You
the
just
curse?
stay away from it. Right?
Is there a reason why you don't drink?
I just don't want to.
You don't like how it tastes?
I don't like it either, yeah.
You don't like the taste, yeah.
That's a non-alcoholic.
I'm not drinking it.
Nah, I feel you, man. It's important to break those cycles because, like I said, I've seen it from like the top all the way down to the bottom. Like me and my cousins, like if your mom's mom got pregnant at a certain young age, and then your mom got pregnant at a certain age, you got two people showing you this probably not the way you should go. You know what I mean? But then if you mess around and it happens to you, stop at the first child. Like no more.
Keep going.
Right. Don't keep going. And I'm saying that just because I truly do believe like the black family is stronger when it's a husband, it's a wife, and then the children.
It's like statistically proven too.
Yeah,
The father in the house.
that's a fact.
So, to piggyback, I'm glad we're here. There's two things I want to say.
Okay.
Because a generational curse, I feel like this was bestowed on the black family. The separation of the black man from the family. In my family, we have majority women, very strong individuals.
Absolutely.
Couple married,
Yeah.
but majority no.
Yeah.
Right? I had to learn from these women as a boy,
Sure.
but they could never teach me how to be a man. So where do I learn that? A lot of people deviate to the streets. That's a generational curse. Was that bestowed? Maybe. But we're products of our environment, right?
Oh, that's a fact. And I'm glad you said that because sometimes I feel like the huge disconnect between black men and black women is just that. For example, I've met women in my life and I've dated a few. And I feel like their mothers, grandmothers, and aunts can teach them exactly how to be a woman. How you should dress, how you should talk, how you should, operate in a corporate environment, and how to either, cater to a man to a certain degree and cook. But when it comes to communicating and actually getting along with, we just missed the mark. You know what I mean? Because I truly do feel like your mom, your grandma, aunt, they beautiful examples. But if they're single and trying to show you exactly of how you should treat a man, but they have no man around.
What's your example?
What's your example? And so sometimes when I've met women in dating and you popping off with, a man needs to do this, he needs to do that, and I'm like, who told you this? You know what I mean? Like, did you read this in a book? Did you see this in a movie? What did Twitter tell you? You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like that's a huge disconnect. And then men as well, because sometimes dads or uncles, we're expected to just have all the women. You know what I mean? Right. Nephew, what you got going? I know you ain't doing that. I know what you got. You got your good 3, 4. Come on now, you got to stay with one. So then when it comes to actually trying to be with a woman that you want to be with,
you were never taught.
Right, and create a family, you were never taught. And so you're pretty much just going off of whatever you think that's right. And I think that's affected me in my dating life as well, if I can be completely personal, because I'd be like, I don't know, as a man, like, do I need to be more forward, or do I need to pull back? And sometimes me pulling back to try and do the right thing, it backfires. You see what I'm saying? Because I feel like as a man, like, you should just lead. Like, I feel like there were a lot of things we're placed on this earth to do, but lead should be at the top of the list. And leading is sometimes being a bit stern, but fair. Because that's how my grandfather always was. Right. You know what I mean? And some people may have an issue with your decisions that you make, but as a man, you got to stand on that and be firm and just say, hey, the way that I want this go, if this ship teeters just a little bit, it's on me. You see what I'm saying? And you can point out that I was wrong or I was right if it goes the right way. I don't know. Serena, how you feel about that?
I have some mixed thoughts on that. I do agree that there are some differences between men and women, but I think a lot of the things that you're saying of how you lead, how you do this, how you should cook. I was not taught how to cook. That was not my mom. I grew up with a lot of women, and those were my examples.
So y'all ate out all the time?
No, my mom cooked, but it was never a thing of
passing it down.
That's what you have to do. Now, my dad's mom, yes, well, I can distinctly remember at like 10, which is I think why I rebelled so much when it came to dating and expectations. She said, oh, we're going to learn how to make this meal so that you could learn how to, you know, meet a man. And I'm thinking, I'm 10. What? What? And, you know, so again, I do think there are differences between the sexes or genders, because gender to me is a construct, and it's a whole other conversation, y'all.
Yeah,
But at that point, to her point, when else would you have learned to cook?
Other than when
Because once you get in college, I don't know about your time, but
I
once you start looking at your own-
loved the Food Network.
Okay.
I was Rachel Ray.
Okay, Rachel Ray.
Emerald Bam, like
Okay.
whole thing. So for me, it was TV. It was because in college I was going to the dining hall, and I
Okay,
was just
I see.
the basics. And thankfully, I had roommates that saw that my cooking abilities were not there and cooked for me. Now, granted, as an adult, yes, I can throw down. Don't sit here and
Okay,
don't think I'm
all right.
just, you know, I'm out here just take right.
I don't know. I see you out to eat all the time, so I didn't know you could throw down.
I can throw down.
Okay.
It doesn't look as good as restaurants.
Okay.
So we gonna
But
put
you
it out
can
there.
get it done. I feel you.
Yes,
I feel you.
but in that regard, yes, I do think family is your first example of what you could be, because like you said earlier, it's a choice.
For sure.
So are these examples that you want, or are these examples of what you don't want?
Do you think a good amount of us go to therapy like we should? Because I know the previous generation before, like my mom's, it was a whole like, just take it to church. You know what I mean? Like, give it to God, pray it away, you'll be fine. But like now, in recent years, especially after the like pandemic, mental health is taken a lot more seriously, anxiety, depression, and things like that. Do you think it's a greater amount of us going to therapy, or are those numbers still like way off? I know it's tough to try and look at it as a whole, because you can only deal with, you know, certain patients people go through, but it's just, I don't know, maybe your family and friends and talking. Like I know a cousin of mine, I didn't even know, but she mentioned the other day, she's like, yeah, because I've been going to therapy for several months now, this is what I do. But everybody doesn't always share that. So
Yeah.
your take there.
You know, I think Black people have experienced a lot of suffering, a lot of hurt, and even still today. So, I mean, I think all of us could benefit from therapy. You know, that's just my thing. So, no, not everybody is in therapy. But I do think, like you said, because of the most recent events, like things are changing and more people are going. But, you know, like you said, we still have these other generations who maybe are not necessarily open and use religion, and everybody doesn't have to go to therapy. Maybe, you know, there's other ways that you can kind of work through trauma, you know, having great, supportive, healthy relationships with your family and friends. There's this whole other part of like wellness where we're like eating healthy, getting enough sleep, practicing mindfulness and wellness, and so those things as well. So
Sure.
Men tend to be less emotionally intelligent than women. So,
Who said that?
Period.
no.
Who said that?
Let's be fair.
Who said that?
It's pushed for women to be in their emotions. So through that experience, you have to learn emotional intelligence, whereas men we're taught to think logically.
But what is
And
emotional
that's-
intelligence, though?
Intelligence is understanding how you feel and knowing how to respond to those feelings. And also communicate those things,
That
which is
part.
why I'm bringing it up, because you said that there's a disconnect in communication. I think we communicate differently, and we're both lacking in certain areas. So when we come to communicate, it's like, well, I'm proficient in this area. Well, I'm proficient in this area, and it's like,
Well, what are the women lacking? I'm just curious.
you tell me.
No, I'm asking you. You said we're both lacking.
Yeah,
I
so-
feel like the
okay.
men are more, you know, like not in tune with their emotions, so they can't really express them.
Right.
Women can.
Let me slide in there right quick, because I see exactly where you're going.
I'm just saying.
Sometimes as a man, when it comes to communication, I feel it's damned if I do, damned if I don't.
I've heard that.
I remember being in a relationship, and it's like, this woman told me, like, Shawn, you don't open up enough. So I see what you're saying on the disconnect on the communication. I'm like, well, I be in my head sometimes. So I just keep it. But she was like, but baby, I need you to open up to me more. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Let me tell you what's going on. This is what it is, right? Now, as soon as we got into a disagreement, you know the first thing that came in our mouth, and this why you like this, because you da-da-da-da-da, then...
Oh, she was wrong for that.
Do you understand? So, yes, there is a disconnect, but I think we both have to just recognize, okay, it's not you versus me,
right.
It's us versus the problem, right? And I feel like a good amount of the people, like in my family, a generational curse was like divorce. Like, just my dad alone, I think he done had 3 marriages. And I told him, bro, after the first one, you should have been done. You know what I'm saying? Like, what you doing? Everybody not necessarily meant to be married. And so I be trying to pay attention to that when it comes to me to just at least form a relationship. Like, you know what I'm saying? Let's get at least to let's have a long-term relationship before like getting engaged and getting married and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I focus on. But I feel you on that disconnect part, because that happens from time to time.
For sure. And like you said, both of us coming from different perspectives, it's us versus the problem. So if you're proficient in logic and things of that sort, and I'm proficient in emotions, it's not us against each other. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like, let's figure this out so we can move forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Y'all talked about communicating, and I wanted to hit on something. I'm a terrible communicator. I'm emotionally attuned. Like, Cry Me a River, Justin Timberlake, all the things. I was getting emotional a moment ago. Me too. But it took me going to therapy to, one, recognize some of what we're talking about with generational curses and how I'm reinforcing them and ones that I'm actively breaking or trying to break, but realizing my communication is not there. And while I have all the emotions and I can say all the things, am I saying the right things? Because you can be saying something, but are people listening?
I got you. Man, like I try and tell people all the time, generational curses in my eyes are a real thing, but it doesn't have to affect you if you don't want it to, or it can. It's just your choice, you know? And so I feel like you have to make the constant decision to make changes, not just for, you, but someone, if you have children behind you, because it affects them as well. And so like my mom used to always say, and like we say over at Twitter Lee Productions, love more, laugh more, be kind. Come on, man, let's cheers to that.
Cheers.
Maybe married, cause where I come from, the girl you choose decide your ceremony. Whether black or in white, it's up to her, so choose wisely, or choose wisely. I'm so up right now, I'm living life.
On the jet, with the set, no overlays, we fly direct. Low on funds, I need some bread. Management, he's sitting that. Book the show, flip the bread. Thank you, Niz, replenished it. That's the biz, we finish it.
If it's live, we'll be going up, up, up. We'll be going